NASCAR heads to the Cowboy State. We got you covered with our DFS tiers and best bets for Texas tonight on the Backroad.
It's a non-points race, but it is a short race. Checkered flag. That's all this race
All right, welcome down the back road, the live fast racing of the NASCAR fantasy and betting programming out here. I am Seth Woolcock guiding your way tonight, and I am joined by a fucking weapon of the NASCAR gambling industry, one of the industry's pioneers, and a man who bets better than he shotguns beers, but we won't hold it against him either way. What's up, Full Tank with Phil? How we doing tonight, my man?
Feeling good. And after that intro, man, how could I not be just like jacked up? You're hit me the compliments, hit me with a little chirp there, and I'm ready to go. That was great.
Hell yeah. Always have to take a shot at a Flyers fan when I can, Phil. But appreciate you joining the show tonight. No Elliot and Rod. They are out of town on their way. But we are heading to Texas, which is one of these very interesting tracks here. We don't see it much on the Cup circuit like we did a couple years ago here, Phil. So this was honestly one of the hardest to handicap of the year for me. We're starting a new round in the playoffs as well. We've seen some drivers surprisingly sneak their way through as well. So putting it all together, how do you feel? How are vibes as we head to Texas?
Yeah, I think so. It took me a little bit to get off the mat from Bristol, the night race there. Sunday morning, I kind of woke up. I was like, I wish, it feels like a NASCAR race day. Like, I wish I could just go get it now, because I had such a bad taste in my mouth. Didn't do well. So I was looking forward to it. The race itself, I mean, you said it's kind of few and far between now, and I think that's because NASCAR was hearing the reaction of the fans. The racing just hasn't been good at this track.
Yes.
So that's why. But as far as vibes, I'm cautiously optimistic. It's a mile and a half at the end of the day. So I feel like mile and a halfs, those cookie cutter tracks have good potential for us gamblers out there to try to capitalize, and you could call it like the more predictable racetrack. So I feel good about that. Last year didn't necessarily work out that way. They had a lot of tire issues and leaders just blowing tires after a certain amount of laps. So, in that case, it wasn't as predictable, but they're coming with a new tire. I think you're going to get to that in a bit, but we'll see how it plays out. I'm feeling cautiously optimistic, and I'm, ready to talk bets.
I like that word, cautiously optimistic. And here's the outline for you guys tonight. First, we're going to break down Bristol, do a little in the rear view. Then we're going to do some horizon forecast, look at Texas, any trends, any data sets that we're paying attention and that you, the bettors and the DFS players, should be paying attention to. Then we'll get into our tire tiers. We'll actually rank the field for this as far as DraftKings and Fantrax goes. And then parking garage props, we'll get into our betting cards at the end of the show. If you guys are new to the program, please hit that subscribe button, come back, hang out with us again. You can catch myself here every Thursday night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern time. We also have a lot of fantasy football programming right now and our PGA show. And then, hey, you can come catch Phil on Wednesday nights, part of the NASCAR betting preview show here with Derek Yoder and the boys. So we have a lot happening at IBT. But first, before we look at Texas, let's look in the rear view to what was kind of underwhelming Bristol night race. All right, and at Bristol, it was Denny Hamlin who gets the monkey off his back, despite some late run speed from guys like Kyle Larson, Chris Buescher, Chris Bell. We also had some standout performances here as well from the likes of Ty Gibbs, 5th place finish for the rookie. Michael McDowell, 6th place finish for him, trying to fight his way into the next round. And then Carson Hocevar with a 11th place finish in that number 42 from Legacy Motorsports. Phil, looking at it from a fan perspective, looking at it from a betting perspective, what did you think of this race?
Well, I think we'll start with the fans' perspective. I think if you zoom all the way out, those names that you just called out there, Hocevar, McDowell, Stenhouse, Gibbs, those are some different names. And, if you don't watch the race and then you look and you see those names up there, you're like, wow, good. That's great.
Yeah.
Like, we're seeing some different names out there, but I still think the product on the track, I mean, last year coming out of Bristol, Busher won. And it was like, okay, like new winner, kind of good for him,
Yeah.
That's good to see. But we kind of let that kind of mask the fact that Bristol just really wasn't that great. Like, and NASCAR was dealing with a short track package problem at that time. And so this time coming into it, I think we're kind of like, all right, like, things have been a little bit better this year. I didn't think the product on the track was that good. And it was really tough to pass. Denny, leading, even with all that speed coming behind him, he was still able to get it done. So good for Denny. But from a fan perspective, I think NASCAR, now that they're going back to Bristol, it seems like twice now, they're getting rid of the dirt race.
Thank God.
They really need, thank God, right? I was putting up the praying emojis, like, when they released that, but then, you're kind of like, oh boy, like this product isn't that great. So I don't know if it's because it's only once a year, or what, but they got to do a little bit of work for us to be, super pumped next year. So I'm sure by the time Bristol rolls around in the spring, we'll forget all about it and we'll be jacked up. But I think they need to, kind of work on that package a little bit.
100% agreed with you there, Phil. And moving forward through the rest of the season, we had some shocking exits out of the NASCAR playoffs. Joey Logano, first time a former champion, goes down in the round of 16. Sad to see the number 22 go, but just an off season for him, really. Never really had a lot of consistent finishes. Had a couple here and there, but never strung it together. Kevin Harvick, I mean, man, oh man, was Rod high on Kevin Harvick coming into last week, and rightfully so with his track record at Bristol. The number 4 car, #forever, looks like it's not forever this season. Ricky Stenhouse and Michael McDowell, man, he gave her hell till the finish. Looking at Logano, looking at Harvick, these other names on this list, from a betting perspective, a DFS perspective, are you fading these guys the rest of the way since they now have nothing to race for?
Great question. Maybe Logano a little bit, and we kind of held out hope that Paul Wolf would like kind of do something, and he does do that from time to time. Like that's the reason why you can never really fade him like hard. It's because all of a sudden like Paul Wolf will make a call. But maybe him. I saw some stuff from Matt Weaver today that he's been like bitching about the Netflix documentaries following him around and stuff, and it's just been like he's like trying to saying they're annoying and like stop following me. Like that's just bad vibes. So I don't like that at all. Harvick, I could see him giving some runs. I mean, we're going to some racetracks before the end of the year that he's phenomenal at. I mean, Texas is one of them. We're going to finish at Phoenix, which is his track essentially. So I could see him, being consistent and worth betting on, depending on the odds, and DFS. The other two, big mystery. I would probably say McDowell is my attention more than Stenhouse. But if you told me both of them would be in the top 10 at Bristol, I would be like, no way, dude. I would have said like, here's my money. Like, I'll bet you. And it just shows like there is some parity a little bit in NASCAR to see those guys be able to go out and do that in kind of like a must perform situation. So Stenhouse's team, I could see them kind of having like a big exhale, but McDowell's been pretty consistent. And we're going to go to tracks like the Roval and Talladega, stuff that kind of fits him a little bit more. I wouldn't necessarily fade McDowell, but Stenhouse, I'm going to probably back off on.
Okay. We got Mark in Mississippi in the chat tonight saying, unless Harvick wins Dega, my man is done. Love you to see you in the chat tonight, Mark. Thanks for tuning in, man. I thought McDowell showed a lot of fight last week, man, and I think I'll be intrigued to bet him again. And let's be honest, it's not like Kevin Harvick thought he was going to win a championship. He hasn't had the speed all season. I think more or less he wants to win a race this year. So maybe we see it sometime but before the end of the year. We'll see. As far as us here at the Backroad, our betting card just went under profitability, just a little bit under a quarter of a unit loss for us. We hit the bell top 5. We really went hard on McDowell over Stenhouse, 2 units on that. And that was one of those, Phil, that I loved McDowell last week. I didn't have the nuts to put him on top 10 on the card, but I did like him over Stenhouse because Stenhouse's finishes going into Bristol last week were god awful. Like average finish of like 30 plus the last 6 races. And he showed up. I couldn't believe it. But I was happy to cash that. And man, I can't get an outright right to save my life right now. I was on Denny the 2 weeks prior, and I got Bell and Busher last week. So just a little off for me. Going to try and tighten some things up. What about yourself? How is the betting card over there at the Full Tank with Phil podcast?
Not great. I'll tell you this. I give you props for throwing multiple units down on that head-to-head, because I looked at that, talked about it on the pod, and was like, you know what? I got to back off. I don't know how to take it. And I even said this week, if you had told me that Stenhouse finished 10th, there's no way in the world I would have believed that he lost that matchup. So props to you for being on that, even when they're both coming up with good finishes. But I think I only hit 3 bets. One was the Bell top 5, which was good to see. I hit, I think I took Busher on race day for a top 10 at -122. And then I had Kyle Busch over Blaney in a head-to-head matchup that was pretty juiced. It was like -150 or something. So other than that, took a bit of a bath. My outrights all finished in the top 10, just, weren't there. Had some other head-to-heads that I felt really strongly about, Jones over Almirola being one of them. And he just, Jones right now is treating me like those like fantasy football running backs where like, when you're on their bench, they go out and they have like 3 touchdowns, but when you start them, they suck. So he's, kind of my white whale right now, but, had Briscoe over Suarez as well, and I believe strongly in that one, even though they're both kind of shit boxes right now. Yeah, and they just didn't come through for me. So it was just one of those nights, man. And that's why I was saying I was kind of happy to get out of there and look forward to something else, because it stinks when you feel strongly about something and it, it's one thing for it to come just short. Yeah, it's another thing for it to just completely miss, and it's just like makes you question everything. So we'll go back to the lab and we'll cook something up,
Absolutely. Well, guys, let's get to the lab here for Texas. Let's look in the front view here at Horizon Forecast and break down some of these trends and data sets coming up.
Hey, Michael, it was only 20% chance of rain. I think we got all 20.
So we head to Texas. Is a 1.5 mile intermediate with that low tire wear. And I think that's kind of why maybe this place gets a bad rep. I feel like with some of these intermediate, I like higher tire wear tracks. I think it makes the race a little more interesting down the side of it. However, we do have a new right side tire here from Goodyear. Logano, Hamlin, Suarez, they did test this back in July. So something to note there. We're not really sure how that's going to play out here, if it does at all, if it affects this race. Looking at some of these comps here, Phil, I took Charlotte, Kansas, and Las Vegas, some of these other other intermediate tracks into effect. Did you weigh them or any other tracks here for your comps?
Yeah, 100%. Those were the tracks for me. And I live and die by iFantasy Race, and their track comparisons, Kansas, Charlotte, and Vegas were the direct comps. He does have a couple tracks listed as secondary comps, where if you really wanted to get crazy, you could. But I think that just by going off of those tracks alone, I think we have enough information to kind of form opinions and see guys rise to the top of the stat sheet. So those were the ones I was looking at. The way I sliced it was the last 8 races at Texas specifically. I think, and it's a great conversation to have. Like all week, I've been kind of seeing people put their opinions out of like how much emphasis do you put on track history. I pretty much have like a 50-50 split. Okay. So I think you need to really consider track history there. But then also looking at the last 10 races of those comp tracks with Texas. So that's essentially since the next gen car came into play. And then 4 races this year. So 2 Kansas, 1 of Vegas and Charlotte each. So good different data sets to kind of look at. You're not putting all eggs in one basket. You can kind of see like, okay, where's the correlating driver here of all three sets, and see how they match up. So sometimes you have to choose, if it's, what do you care about more based on a bet? But for the most part, I think for me, that was a good way to kind of lay the foundation for the week.
Love it. And practice qualifying, we're going to get that back on Saturday here, 11:35 a.m. Eastern time. That's going to kick off for practice qualifying at 12:20. And I'm happy to have it back on Saturday. Having Friday qualifying, I used to love it when I was a little bit younger and had Friday nights to actually sit there and watch it. It's a little bit hectic now in the adult world. So I'm happy to have it back on Saturday morning. Watch that while I'm getting ready with some college game day and the boys over there on ESPN. Stages this week. Lap 80, lap 160, and 267 will bring us home just for a total right over the 400-mile mark. Some of the trends I wanted to point out here as we head to this race. This is just the second time we've opened with Texas in the round of 12. And active drivers who have won the fourth playoff race before: Denny Hamlin, Kyle Busch, Martin Truex Jr., and Tyler Reddick last year winning this son of a bitch. And Brad Keselowski, Martin Truex, and Harvick all have 2 poles here. However, it's Rowdy with 4 wins, Denny and Harvick with 3 each. So the names you kind of expect at the top there with the pedigree. And this is a very average track as far as what qualifying matters here. Just about average in the terms of grid winners have come from the top 5 of the grid at 57% of the time. So looking at that, is there anything that you're pulling? Because to me, I feel like Texas is just the very run-of-the-mill, nothing too out of the ordinary that caught me off guard here when looking at these trends, Phil.
Yeah. I mean, you said it, like 57% of the time starting in the top 5. I think when you expand that out, these are some numbers that I like to hit on my show as well. Top 10, starting in the top 10, it's 80%.
Yeah.
So that is a pretty daunting number. So that pretty much fits the billing of what we've been saying, like pretty kind of a boring track. Guys up front, I don't want to throw the F1 name out there, but
Yeah.
well, the guys who start up front typically stay up there. So I think if you're throwing bets down on this race beforehand, like I have done, you're watching qualifying with like fingers crossed, because only 6 times in 42 races has someone started outside the top 20 and won the race. That's not necessarily saying they can't perform well, but like last year we saw a driver start 31st and finish in the top 5. Like that's possible. But if you're taking outrights, you really need your guy to start in the top 10 at least. So that's where, that top 10 starting position is key to me when you're talking about outright picks.
Well, I think it comes back to unit allocation. And this is one of those races. I'm putting out a pretty small card ahead of practice and qualifying. I usually go a little bit bigger on these Thursday shows, but today I'm going to be a little bit tighter with my bankroll, just knowing that, because if you're on an outright, we might love it tonight. And then, less than 48 hours from now, it could be valid if we get a bad qualifying time. So let's keep that in mind here as well. But Phil, let's get a little more specific here with the drivers as we rank them here in tire tiers. All right, you guys know them, you love them. There are tire tiers. We are ranking these, looking at our DraftKings and Fantrax salaries here. So, Phil, I'm going to tee you up here first, man. Who do you think is the 101? Who is that one driver, whether you're playing season long, whether you're playing daily this week, that you want to put in your lineup? And keep in mind, I am watching and I am leading our Fantrax league after your fuck up a couple weeks ago.
I realized pretty quickly, by the way, Seth, that it is damn near. I don't know how you guys like kept in the hunt when I was blowing everybody out of the water, because it is so hard to make up points in that. So more power to you. Drivers this week, I mean, we're saying as far as like value, right? Like
Yes.
we're not
Yep.
saying like best. Okay. Because I think this is a guy, anybody who watched the NASCAR betting preview show and is watching this right now, they're going to laugh. I've got a pretty unique bet going on with this driver, but Ryan Blaney, looking at where he's stacked up right now on DraftKings, you can get him on DraftKings at 9,400 compared to some of these other drivers. Like he's got the most top 10 finishes in the last 8 races at Texas, 7 for 8 top 10. And when I'm looking on DraftKings at that price, I'm looking for someone to be in that top 10 range. And I have high hopes for Ryan Blaney. We'll probably talk about him later, but he's someone that I think is a value play at Texas. This season, he has been up and down, and people have talked about him a number of different ways. Start of the season, he kind of looked like a world beater, then really started to fizzle out. Penske as a whole kind of rough middle of the season
Yeah.
and to now. So, but you look at how his last few seasons have gone, and this has been a bright spot for him. So I think you got to look to the track history here and say, hey, 9,400 for a driver that's got the most top 10s at this track, I'm in. And so that's why I put him in the top spot.
Okay. I like it, man. I like it. Ryan Blaney looks good in a cowboy hat too. So maybe we see it again here on Sunday. I'm going to go with Denny Hamlin. It's the chalky pick here. It's 1,100. But if I'm paying up for one of these top guys on the board this week, it is going to be Hamlin. And I think the only stat I need to throw out for Hamlin coming into this race, over his last 16 starts in 2023, he has been top 6 in the total speed rankings, courtesy of iFantasy Racings, in every race but 3. Those races are Chicago, Indy Road Course, and Daytona 2. So I think Denny Hamlin, like, as long as he doesn't fuck up in the pits, as long as there isn't some bullshit that happens on the track and he gets wrecked, he's going to finish in the top 3 or 5. It's just a matter of how high for me. So I just feel better than with Denny Hamlin than anyone else in that range. He's more consistent. I know what I'm getting for that price. So I'm going with him there. And then it looks like we have Mark in the chat saying KFB 34 starts, average finish 16th. Yeah, you're right in that ballpark. Kyle Busch, another one of these guys who has the pedigree as well. So after that, Phil, who else do you think belongs here in this top tier?
Yeah, I mean, let's throw Kyle Busch up there. I mean, I think Mark's right. This is, especially when you're looking at that range that he's in, like he's just above Blaney. And, you know, I have Busch 14-1. I have Busch in a head-to-head we'll talk about later. I think when it comes to Busch and this round, this is something that they have to do well in, because I don't know how the next 2 races are going to shape up for that team. So you have to imagine that what's going through their meetings this week in that team is, this is a racetrack where Kyle Busch has been successful. This is a racetrack where RCR has been successful. We need to do well. This is a must perform situation. And so for that value, he's getting on DraftKings. He's 9,600, right above Blaney. I think both those guys are pretty solid in that range there.
Okay, we got Cleveland Kid in the chat saying Blaney just might get the Charlotte car this weekend. He will get the best of everything with Logano out of the picture. And that's a great point, man. With Logano being out, it's all hands on deck for Ryan Blaney's team right now in the Penske garages. So I agree with you there. And he was excellent at Charlotte. I was hoping we would see that a couple weeks ago at Kansas. Didn't quite come to fruition. Had that early run speed, just couldn't put it together late. So like that call there, I'm very high on Kyle Busch, so I'm right there with you. I think William Byron, again, I'm going with the chalk, but looking at a guy who was second in the total speed rankings last season at this track, didn't get quite the finish he deserved. I thought 7th. And we haven't heard from Byron lately. You know, he's kind of just been, I don't want to say inconsistent, because he's been running top 10, but kind of towards the back half that top 10 as far as the total speed rankings go. But has a great history here at Texas, has been really good at these comp tracks all season long. So I'm in on William Byron. He had the fastest car at Las Vegas, second fastest at Charlotte. I think the 24 will be fast here once again. And as Cleveland Kid kind of pointed out here in the chat, Phil, not all the resources for Hendricks are going towards Byron, but they have a shit ton of resources and they're going to 2 cars. So I love Byron this week as well.
Yeah, I'm going to be talking about Willie B when we get to some of the sports betting. instead of the DFS stuff. So can't agree more with the comments about him being fast this weekend, being good there. We'll get into some of that later. So I don't hate the pick.
Here we go. Who else do you think belongs in this top tier? Because I have one more on my list. But who do you think's a good value here?
The last guy that I'll throw out there is Tyler Reddick. Tyler Reddick, he is, let me pull him up here. He's just above Cowboy. So he's the 10,200.
Yep.
And I guess he's the fifth guy down on the list from the top of the board. But he is someone, first of all, he's the defending champ of this race. And his performance at Texas, he's got 4 starts, 1 win, 2 top 5s, 3 top 10s, and he's 4 for 4 finishing the top 15. So when I'm playing daily fantasy, I need my guy to finish the race, right?
Yep.
I mean, I'm not a huge daily fantasy player, so I may not be the greatest for this analysis, but when I play those, I need him to at least finish the race. And he's been consistent being up front at Texas specifically. But then you want to zoom out to kind of how they're doing this year. He has been the 3rd fastest. If you look at all of the comp tracks so far on mile and a half in 2023, total speed ranking, he's 3rd in NASCAR, and he was 1st at Kansas, 3rd at Charlotte. So he's been getting faster as the year goes on at this style track. And so it just all, to me, kind of bubbles up into a good situation for Tyler Reddick this weekend, whether you're betting him in any way or you're putting him in a lineup.
Okay, I like it, man. I will drop down a tier here because I think that gives us a nice top tier. I'm going to throw both RFK drivers here in this top, or this driver B tier. And listen, man, Brad Keselowski, he pulled this son of a bitch last year. And Brad is one of those guys consistently getting it done and still being overlooked on fan tracks and on DraftKings as well. Right now on DK going for 8,900, Busher 8,800. We saw their price finally get in that 9K tier last week on DraftKings there, but it's back down in the 8s, which is a very good deal for Brad Keselowski. You want to look at recent finishes here since 2020. It's Brad Keselowski number 1 in average finish, 6.8, 4 top 10s, all top 10s for him. So I think Brad's going to have the speed once again, 7th in the total speed rankings last year at this track. I like Brad a lot. And Chris Buescher, man, like, he's just a top 5 machine right now. He was a top 10 machine, and he's just up that bar another level here. So I don't think you can go wrong with any of the RFK guys as your second driver in your lineups this week.
Yeah, I'm into Brad. I think I don't disagree with you putting Buescher in tier 2. But I think for this week specifically, the only reason he's up that high is because of the fact that he just keeps proving people wrong or keeps proving themselves to be worthy. So that's the only reason. Yeah, history is not great, and his stats so far this season aren't great. That's why I'm going to be fading him in a head-to-head coming up. But to talk about these tiers, I understand why you put them 2, and I can't probably make a case enough to drop him down a tier. So yeah, and with Brad, he's somebody that I'm very high on this week.
Who else do you have here in the B tier, Phil?
Man, well, this is where it gets really tough, dude. Because after the first set, it's really turns into quite a bit of slop. So, but we're not out of this. We're still, in some New York strip here. I'm going to go with Chase Elliott. I think we talked about him a bunch on NASCAR Betting Preview Show. His outright number is ridiculous, and therefore his DraftKings number is a bit ridiculous. He's the 9th best driver, listed 9,200. And, Chase Elliott is someone that obviously has had his trials and tribulations this season.
Yeah,
but
sure.
This track, I could see this working out pretty well for him when everybody's kind of looking the other way. I mean, he's 5 for 8 in top 15 finishes. Not blowing anybody out of the water by any means, but the overall metrics for Chase Elliott is not too shabby. I mean, he's got a 7th and a 6th on mile and a half this season. He had a 34th place finish in there. I can't leave that out. But the fact of the matter is, I mean, if he puts it top 10, I think you're getting some good value on him. So I'll throw Chase into the mix here for the value purpose.
Okay, first non-playoff driver on the list there for us. I will go with a surprising playoff driver that's left in it, and it's Bubba Wallace, man. Talk about a guy who's going to be fucking amped up and ready to go here at Texas. It's Bubba Wallace. He makes it into the top 12. And man, like you look at these comp tracks for Bubba Phil, and like he's been pretty good. 8th in the total speed rankings, looking at all these mile and a half high speed ones so far this season. 5th at Las Vegas, 4th at Kansas in the total speed rankings. And just been consistent, man. And I think that's what Bubba's kind of given us. Hasn't had the best finishes the last 2 races. That's the only thing that prevented me from going all in on him this week in my lineups and in the betting card. But I really like what he's been doing at these tracks. We've seen it for almost the last 2 years now, how good he is at this style of track. So give me some Bubba Wallace. He's the man on the thumbnail this weekend.
Don't hate it. I mean, I think there's a lot of people just kind of riding it. I mean, I wish we could have odds to make the top 8, make the round of 8, because I think this sets up well for him and that team, because he's good on mile and a half, like you just laid out. He's going to be good this week. I don't hate the tier 2 setup for him, but he's better at Talladega than he is Daytona, and the Roval is his best road course. So I mean, it really does. He's not great, but it's his best one. So I think he could surprise some folks if we've got some act of God stuff going on elsewhere. So yeah, the other driver that I'll throw out there, I mean, we've got a couple guys that are left over here only because of their price, in my opinion. But how could we drop Kyle Larson down to anything below number 3 or number 2 there? I mean, he has the ability. Kyle Larson in 2021 just stunk up the show and then did the same thing in the All-Star race, I'm pretty sure, that same year. So I can't drop him down below tier 2. It's just because his price is so high. That's the only reason why he's not up there. But he has every bit of capability to making this the Kyle Larson show this weekend. Even if some of the stats don't necessarily back that up, he's the number 1 ranked driver on the wintherace.info model and some others. So Kyle's definitely got to be there.
Okay, and I think we can't drop Truex down any lower either.
Agreed.
The guy who all season long has been the best point scorer for your DK lineups. And it's weird with Truex because you look at the total speed rankings across these comp tracks: 4th at Las Vegas, 2nd at Kansas, 4th at Charlotte, and then Kansas 2. I mean, just a misfire, just complete misfire by that team that week, 19th. So I think Truex now he can finally breathe a little bit. Points reset. He's back up at the top, has a little bit of breathing room. So I like Truex here as well. I think kind of like you said, it's just the price. I think there's other people I like up in that area, 10-5 right now for Truex. I'd rather pay up for Denny or Byron, I think, or drop down a little bit more for me. So anyone else you think that belongs in this B tier? Or do you want to crack open the C's?
Let's get to the C's. And I'll open it up with someone who's been left out, in case you're watching this saying well, what about this guy? He's pretty legit. And it's Christopher Bell.
Yeah.
The only reason I haven't talked about him is because of his price that we're looking at for these DFS numbers. But I think he fits. I'll make the quick case here for him to be right in the middle. And it's because it doesn't matter if you're talking about this season on mile and a halves or his 4 races at Texas. It's hit or miss, 50% one way or the other. This season, he's got 2 top 10s and 2 terrible finishes. At Texas, 2 top 10s, 2 terrible finishes. So it really speaks to being right in the middle. So I can't, I could get behind someone saying hey, I like Bell for a top 5 or something like that. But as far as these lineups go, the other thing that you see about him is he starts well this season on mile and a half, and his average finish is really bad. So that really hurts you on the daily games or the weekly games there. So you need your guy. If he's starting up front, he's got to stay there. And he has not been able to do that a couple times, and that could really hurt your lineup. So that's why I have him in tier 3 at that price. You're muted there, Seth. At least I don't hear you.
Appreciate that, Phil. A couple notes here from Cleveland Kids saying, I think Elliott's mailing it in for the rest of the season. He was beat out by Yaley in fastest laps at Bristol, 3-2. That's all you need to say. And then Mark making the campaign for our guy Ross Chastain in tier 2. Listen, Mark, we're gonna throw him up here at some point, but I don't think it'll be tier 2. I'm gonna get a little weird, man, because I think Texas is a weird track. So we're going to talk about someone who we don't usually talk much about on this show. Doesn't really make it out of the Fs anymore, honestly. But Austin Dillon, dude, he like I sometimes believe in the narrative that there are certain teams that are great at certain tracks, and I believe it here. This is not a fluke, and that's what partially why I like Kyle Busch so much this week is because I think a lot of Reddick's success last season was partially due to the setup and the team and the car here. And same with Austin Dillon, man. Right now, coming in at 6,800, it's been a terrible season for Austin Dillon, one of the worst we can remember in recent history. However, look at what he's done at Texas. He won here a couple years ago. All 4 of his last starts have all gone for top 20s here as well. Last year, 15th in the total speed ranking, 9th fastest late in the run as well. So I think Austin Dillon has a little bit of juice here, and he's one of my favorite pivot plays down the board a little bit, Phil.
I agree 100% in saying that he's good value at that number of 6,800. When you're dipping down that low, you just need your guy to be able to just kind of hold steady. And he practices well. Like he was first in practice last year, started 7th. He's 7 for 8, finishing in the top 20 in the last 8 races at Texas. So there are certain tracks that just speak to certain guys. He's got a win here, I believe, years back. So this is a driver that I'm fine with throwing in there for that number at 6,800.
Okay. Who else do you think belongs in the C tier? And I almost feel like we got to another little mini tier here in the C tier because I really don't like a lot of what's left on the board here.
Well, I can tell you that I really like Alex Bowman this week from a betting standpoint. I think, we'll talk about maybe where we can squeeze him into a bet. But, and there's Mark Mississippi calling him out. Yeah. I mean, he's undervalued, I believe. And, the point that Cleveland Kid was making about Chase, you could probably apply that here to Bowman. But
yeah,
I mean, he is looking at the last 10 races on these comp tracks. He's first in average finish. He's got a win, 3 top 5, 6 top 10s. And in 2023, those 4 comp tracks, he's third in average finish, 8.3. And that's despite some really shitty starting positions. So he's someone that might be able to start back in the pack and make up a lot of points. So I think the 48 should definitely be in your lineup.
Okay. All right. We got Didi in the chat. What's up, Didi? Thanks for joining us tonight. We appreciate you, fam. All right. Let's do it. Let's throw Ross Chastain up there, man. And talk about a guy who really does kind of need one here, man. Like he needs to shift the momentum a little bit. He kind of, I feel like, limped in to this. He didn't have a great run at Bristol. He got stage points early on in that race that kind of sent him into this. But when looking at Ross Chastain, it's not all bad here. 10th in green flag speed, 11th in total speed ranking last season. And looking at the comp tracks, it could be a lot worse as well. He kind of comes in right in that mid tier, 13th, looking at all the comp tracks, total speed rankings, 8th Las Vegas, 7th at Kansas, has kind of just been okay as of late, 12th fastest at Kansas 2. So he's right around there as well. I don't hate Ross this week. I don't love him. But at 8,500, it's okay. I just think I'd rather pay for Bubba or Busher a little bit higher, but I still think he belongs in the C tier. Anyone else that you think belongs in the C tier, Phil?
Yeah, I'll throw somebody out there to you. And that is someone who's right next to him on the list, just a smidge cheaper. And it's Kevin Harvick. So he obviously is dead as far as the championship goes. We talked about that earlier, but the stats still speak to throwing him into this tier because at Texas specifically, Harvick is just very good. I mean, 8 races, he's got 2 wins, 5 top 5, 6 for 8 top 10 finishes. Just, finished 19th last year, but last year was a wonky race. So you can kind of say, all right, well, let's get rid of that. But this season, a season where Stewart-Haas has been just brutal. He's got 1 top 10 and 3 straight 11th place finishes. So I like when you can kind of zero in on a spectrum of where, the ceiling and the floor for drivers. And for Harvick, it seems like it's right around that 10th, like 9th to maybe 13th range. And I'm fine with that as a third tier driver at 8,300 DraftKings dollars there. I think that's kind of a nice sturdy foundation to kind of set your lineup around.
Okay, I like it, man. I like it. Out of respect, I'm gonna throw Joey Logano in here. Didn't have a ton of speed here last year. However, he was second fastest late in the run, finished second somehow in this race. It was kind of one of those finishes you look back, man, how did Logano finish in second? But he did. And then, man, the value of all values, it just keeps giving. It's Michael McDowell. I know he's another one who's out of the playoffs. It's a real bummer to see. However, he did have a really, really nice run here last year, Phil. Looking at the total speed rankings, he was 13th, ended up finishing 11th, 8th in late run speed as well. You're getting Michael McDowell way down the list at 6,300. That's lower than Allmendinger, Stenhouse, Almirola. I think that's a misprice once again. I don't know why we can't ever get a good pricing, an accurate pricing, I should say, on the 34, but I'm going to take advantage once again.
I won't veto it, but I'm a little hesitant on McDowell this
Ooh.
weekend, specifically. I mean, I don't think the mile and a halves have been too kind to him, as far as like them having just natural speed, and it kind of reflects that in his finishes. He doesn't have a single
Totally.
finish inside the top 20 on mile and a halves this season. So I won't veto it down to tier 4, but
I think I
that'll
might
just be
after
my
you say
comment.
that. I think I might after you say that. I'm be honest. Uh, yeah, that's a little rough. Let's get to the tier 4s though, Phil. Who else do you think belongs here? Mark, he thought Daniel Suarez belonged in tier 3. I don't think I'm that high on Suarez. I don't know if I can even get him in this tier, honestly, Phil.
And Suarez, if you look at his just speed rankings on the mile and a halves this year, like it's been literally the synopsis of Trackhouse in 2023. Like started with some high hopes and then
Yeah.
just like kind of fizzling out.
Yep.
And so for that reason, now let me just check. I need to see what he's priced at, see if there's anybody in and around him that I like better. But yeah, I mean, he's priced like almost the same as Bowman.
Yeah, I can't
He's
do that.
$200 lower, and yeah, and I think I like Jones, who's right underneath him, better, just based on Jones's track history. 6 for 8 top 10 finishes, 7 for 8 top 20s. Just Eric Jones. I told you he's someone who I can't really zero in on, but
Yeah.
6th place last year in a wonky race, and Eric Jones's numbers have been getting stronger. I mean, he finished 7th in speed ranking at the last mile and a half of Kansas. So I don't think I like Suarez in the tier 3, but I think because if we're putting Jones there, I'm fine putting him in tier 4. Because they're
Okay.
pretty similar, and I would love to see a head-to-head matchup on those guys this week.
Okay. Is there anyone else you think that belongs in this tier 4? We have some guys who have finished good at Texas in the last few years, but do you trust them here? That's the question mark.
Well, so there's one guy that we mentioned earlier. I mean, the reason he's not in tier 3, I think, is just because 7,900 is a little too pricey. But Ty Gibbs, I think, deserves a little respect. If we can't have Ty Gibbs in the 5th tier, he's been
Yeah.
performing really well, and that team is JGR obviously. Even though he's the 4th car, I mean he's strong, so can't have him in tier 5. The other driver that I'm going to talk about in a little bit, talked about him last night, and maybe I'll save some of the explanation for the bet, but Justin Haley is someone
Ooh.
that I think is way down the list. And once you get into the slop, right, of drivers below 6,000, and I would even take Haley. Actually, I think they have him priced like pretty accurately. He's above some of the guys that he's matched up against. So Justin Haley, I think you can trust more than any of the guys below him, and you can trust him more than a couple of the guys ahead of him. And again, if you're in this realm, you're not looking for a guy to finish top 5,
Yeah.
but Justin Haley did that last year at this track. So he's someone to watch when you're getting down that list.
And I have a feeling I know what bet you're on because I might be on the other side of it. But I'm going to throw Ryan Preece up here. I think Ryan Preece is a guy who he hasn't been great at the mile and a half this year. I can't say he has been, but he feels like a guy who's just not mailing it in right now. He still has something to race for. He's still tying up what seems like the loose ends of a contract extension here with SHR. So I like Ryan Preece. I like what he's shown us lately. 12th last week, 18th the week before that. I'll talk a little bit more about him in the betting segment. But I do like Preece here. What about Chase Briscoe? Where does he belong? Because Chase Briscoe somehow had a great run here last year, Phil. The numbers weren't necessarily there for him. Didn't have a lot of speed. However, he comes out, finishes. Where did he finish? It was pretty high up. I think it was a top 10, wasn't it? For Chase Briscoe. It was a nice day. So any thoughts on Chase Briscoe here? He finished 5th in this race last season.
5th in this race last season, but if you remember, I mean, the season that he had last year is not comparable to what he's been
Yeah.
doing so far this year. He was in the playoffs last year.
Yeah.
At that point in time. This year, Chase Briscoe, I mean, I don't trust him whatsoever. His best finish so far this season on a mile and a half is 19th, and it came at Kansas last time around. He is 4th from the bottom. 5th from the bottom in terms of total speed ranking on these mile and a halves this year. And Kansas I'm a guy who's like, all right, what have you done for me lately? Are you showing improvement?
Yeah.
Kansas was faster, but he 28th in total speed ranking in that race. That was his best all year. So I don't trust Briscoe for as far as I can throw that car. So that's my thought on Briscoe. I mean, I think for what he's priced at, I think he's got to be last in the last tier.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
What about Carson Hocevar? Because he's someone that I think belongs in the D tier with just how this kid's performing. And man, it's been a roller coaster of a season for him. He took a lot of shit earlier, I think, in the truck series, everything he was kind of doing, making some bad moves, but he has turned it on here and is getting better every single race in this Cup car and has been miles ahead of what Noah Gragson was in it. So he's going to continue to be my $5 foot long over there on Fantrax. That's what 100%. He is. So he's going to be my lineup probably the rest of the season, just so you're aware and so everyone else is aware. But yeah, I'll ride with him in here in DraftKings as well, coming in a little bit more expensive. He's getting some respect at 6,500. Don't like him quite as much as Michael McDowell this week, but I do like him still.
I think he's worth a shot in the dark. Obviously you're going to need like Fantrax, right? You throw that out there. I love when you get a guy like that for $5. It allows you to play so much more with your lineup, and his floor being 32nd, I'm fine with that, right? Because you don't expect much. But when he goes out and he does something like he did last week, wow, you know what I mean? That's pretty crazy. And so he's showing what he has. He's flexing his muscles. I'm totally fine having him in that tier, just because of his ceiling being, pretty solid for where he's at in that list.
Okay. All right. Anyone else that you think deserves to be ranked here as we kind of round this out here, Phil?
I'm looking at this list, man. I mean, I don't see much. I don't think I can make a case for any of these guys to be at the level of the guys in that, 4th tier, that tier D. It's just, sad. I mean, I'm looking at somebody like Allmendinger, somebody like Almirola, Stenhouse even, and I wish I could make a case for them to be higher up, but I just can't do it.
Okay, I'll rank one more here because I do like Mark's comment. JJ Yaley back in the 15 this week, and I think he is a pretty good shitbox, as Mark says here in the chat. Like when you're thinking of JJ Yaley, he's 5,000 right now on DK, averaging just about 23.3 points per race for him. And he always finishes a couple places better than he qualifies. Like that's kind of who JJ Yaley is at this point in his career. So I don't hate it. Let's go ahead and run through the rest of the list here. We'll just kind of give a sentence on each. No Austin Cindric for me this week. There hasn't been a lot of Austin Cindric love for me in the last couple months. Really this whole year, man. It's been a down year for him. Corey LaJoie actually had a really nice run here last year, but just the finishes as of late haven't been there for him. Eric Almirola, way too high price,
That's the
7,100.
problem. That's the problem with him. Yeah, too high.
Can't get after it. AJ Allmendinger, same thing, 6,600 for a guy we haven't seen on Texas in a while. Don't want anything to do with him. And then the number 21 car, Harrison Burton, dude, he had some good runs going. And last two races here for Harrison Burton, or last three races, excuse me, average finish at 32.7 in the Cup Series. It has not been great for him. And then I believe we have 38. We got Zane Smith in the 38, if I'm correct on that.
I did not see if it was Gillen or him, but
Yeah,
I'm assuming it's Zane if he's
yeah,
racing.
yeah. I think we have Zane in the 38. Ricky Stenhouse, let's throw him in the Fs just out of some respect. Stenhouse has been not great a mile and a half this season, but he keeps surprising us. He did last week, so I think he deserves to be ranked. And then I believe in the 51 this week, we're looking at our driver changes. We also have, that's where Todd, I think, is in the 51. So don't mind Todd. 62 is not racing, by the way. That is a typo. 62 should not be there. 77, Ty Dillon. He is what he is. And BJ McLeod back in the 78, baby. Our friends over at Live Fast. So any thoughts on that final grouping there, Phil, before we get into the betting?
Yeah, I mean, I could get down with Stenhouse being in that last group. Now that you say it, I mean, he had a great run at Charlotte. Was fast at Charlotte, and if he could recapture some of that, and they're not just like checking out for the year,
Yeah.
I could see him being a play at that number. So I don't mind that.
All right. Well, let's go ahead. Let's break it down from a betting perspective with parking garage props. All right, Phil. So let's start how we always do in Parking Garage Props. Let's critique these books. How did you feel the offerings were this week? It's getting harder and harder, and I think the books are getting smarter and smarter. But at the same time, there did feel like some sneaky values this week if you didn't like the top of the board.
I agree with that. I think they are getting smarter, and especially in certain markets. I would say top tens have been
Can't
just
even bet 'em
decimated
anymore.
this year.
Yeah.
Really tough. Like that for years used to be my favorite place to go. I still have top tens that I play each week, but they are, first of all, I haven't been doing well with them recently, and just the markets themselves aren't fair to the gamblers at all. The sports books are just brutal. So but that being said, I thought they're on their game for the most part.
Mhm.
You have Hamlin and Larson up front as the tied co-favorites there at 6-1, and it's a good place to be, I think, or it's fair, and makes it so that I can't really take them at that price. I feel like it's hands off. So then you got to really start going down the board. But as you get down the board, I think you do see some value if you're looking for an outright pick.
Okay, well, let's start there. Let's start in the outright market. Who is one or two drivers that caught your eye that you laid some coin down that you recommend the Backroad listeners do as well?
Yeah, so this was the one driver that stood out to me early in the week, and I'm calling him out specifically just because I don't think we're going to see him at this number anymore, and it's Alex Bowman. So he's 8-1. He's a couple down, a little chalky, but I don't think we're going to see Bowman 8-1 on Sunday morning. And the case that I made last night on the NASCAR betting preview show was, he's been okay at Texas. He has a third place finish there, I believe. Last year he started seventh. Excuse me, started third last year, finished seventh.
You mean William Byron, correct?
Who did I say?
You said Bowman.
Oh my God, my bad. Yeah,
You're good. You're good.
William
You're good.
Byron. Did I say
Yes.
William Bowman?
Maybe I heard it wrong. I proceed.
No,
I
that's
apologize.
my bad. William Byron at 8-1. Jesus. So yeah, I mean he's been pretty solid at Texas, but these comp tracks, man, he's been fast and he's been fast off the truck. And so far this season, his average starting position is 3.3, 2 poles. So the point
Wow.
being, if he puts the car on the pole, he's not 8-1 anymore. And, that right there, you're trying to beat the books, right? So I can't not take him because he's shown speed on these types of tracks this season. His average finish on the 4 comp tracks this season is first in the sport, 5.3. Looking at the last 10 races since the next gen car came in, he's third, 10.0 in average finish. So really good numbers on this style of racetrack. Hendrick engines, we're not at Kansas anymore where Toyota rules. We're kind of going to Chevy country. Chevy's won 3 of the last 4 races here. So I think you mentioned earlier in the show, Seth, how he's just kind of been not really showing up. I think this is where, you think about their season. He's been comfortable for a while.
Yeah.
Now, this is a racetrack where they have an opportunity to pounce and get some more bonus points heading in the round of 8. So I think you need to take him just for the value purpose of I don't believe he'll be 8-1 on Sunday.
Okay. I like that. I like that bet. I looked at William Byron. I was staring at that number for the longest time. I am not down on that, but I am down on another Chevy already. And it's Kyle Busch right now, 16-1 at Bet Rivers. I think this is actually kind of a blatant misprice when you look at all the other books. I mean, Kyle Busch is 14-1 Bet MGM, 14-1 FanDuel, 11-1 DraftKings. I don't know why he's so high here at Bet Rivers, but I'm going to jump on it there. Also, minus 134 for a top 10 at Bet Rivers, which felt like a very fair price once again. Mark here in Mississippi, he's on Willie B with you and KFB with me. And he's trying to add his name right now to the list of drivers who've won this race with 2 different manufacturers. We have Jeff Burton and Carl Edwards who have done that before. Leads active drivers in wins here, top 5s, laps led, you name it. He did crash here, had those tire issues when running 4th last season, but 7th in the total speed rankings. And just one of the most consistent drivers looking at these comps, Phil. He kind of did struggle at Las Vegas earlier this season, finished 14th, but total speed ranking at Kansas, 9th both times, 5th at Charlotte. And when you're looking at all the loop data, like Tyler Reddick just stands out to me. When you're looking at the 2022 loop data for Texas, and I think it opens the door to the conversation. Well, was that the car or was that the driver? I believe it was the car because I've seen Austin Dillon be so fucking good here for so long for no reason. So I think that's going to translate. You have a great car, what was set up last year for this race, and the best ever do it here in Texas. I think 16-1 is a valuable number there, Phil.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, man. And, if it's okay, I'll just get into one of the head-to-heads that I've talked about a couple times so far, and it's Kyle over Chris Buescher. And for all of the reasons that you said about Kyle Busch, I'm into that. And at the same time, Chris Buescher, I mentioned earlier, I'm fine with him being in that second tier because of just the fact that he just keeps doing it. But the data is telling me this is where it comes to an end. He's got 1 top 15 finish at Texas in the last 8 races, and it came 8 races ago. And so the rebuttal to that is like, well, this year is just different. I disagree. On these comp tracks, he's also not been that good. 18.3 is his average finish in 2023 on these comp tracks. So Kyle Busch hasn't beat 3-1 head to head on the 4 comp tracks that we've been to so far this season. Kyle Busch is consistently good at Texas, like you mentioned, and you're calling out the RCR stuff. I love that point as well. It's just a feather in the cap. So I expect big things from Kyle Busch. I have him as an outright ticket. I have him in a head-to-head matchup against Buescher. And again, I'll say it again. They need this. They need it.
Yep.
Because if they don't get it, I think they're cooked. And you're going to be looking to see, who else is who's going to take advantage of that. Because right now they're in the good. But if they wreck or something goes wrong or they miss it, man, I would not be too thrilled if I had a Kyle Busch championship ticket.
100% there with you. Anything else for you in the outright market? Kyle Busch, the only one I'm on pre-practice and qualifying here. I do like the shout out to William Byron that you gave as well. And I think Denny's going to be fast as hell, but 5-1 is just a really, really low number to lay pre-practice and qualifying. So I'm out of outrights. Anything else for you before we go to the placement market?
Well, I'll give a segue to it then. I mentioned him earlier as the 1-1, and it's Ryan Blaney. I mean, I think he's a decent value at like 12-1. I think he could sometimes at one point in the week, I think he was like 13 or 14-1. I don't have my website up now, which shows me the best value at the moment, but he is someone
12-1,
that
I think, for the most
12-1 right now. Yeah.
Yeah.
So 12-1, I mentioned why I liked him for a top 10. He's 7 for 8 top 10 Texas. It's just something about this track seems to speak with him. But then you're looking at this season. I mean, he won Charlotte, right? So if they're bringing that Charlotte car, this is something that you got to watch out for. So I think if he goes out and practice and performs really well, then it's like, oh yeah, no shit. Like Blaney, of course. Like, why not? And then that value is going to go to probably like 9-1, 8-1. I think he's a good sprinkle because I'm still hesitant for him to win the race outright based on what we've seen recently. But the point that somebody in the comments made, or maybe you made it, of throwing all the resources in, Penske's not been in this situation before.
No.
Where you've got one car for the next 3 rounds. Like that's wild. So yeah, 3 races in a row, they're throwing everything they got. Blaney is definitely someone to watch for. So I like a little sprinkle on his outright for sure.
I was high on him at Kansas a couple weeks ago, so I can't blame the call out there either. Number 1 in fastest late in a run speed last year at this track, so something to keep in mind. Could see some late run speed out of Blaney in this number 12 car. I'm going to go to the placement prop market, and we're finally at the point where we can no longer bet Denny Hamlin plus money for a top 5, which is a total bummer. But I don't give a fuck. I'm going to top 3 market. Plus 160 at Caesars. I just can't get away from this guy. I brought up that stat earlier. In the last 16 races, he's only had 3 tracks outside of the top 6 in the total speed rankings at Chicago, Indy, Daytona. Not comparable tracks, kind of the oddballs here over the last couple months. Top 8 in speed ranking here last season. 4th best late in a run speed here last season. No surprise, this guy always has the best late run car, it seems like. So, like, unless he fucks himself and there's some issue on pit road, maybe a mystery loose wheel again, he's going to finish in the top 5. And I'm going to lay it down that I think he can get in that top 3, get me into the plus money situation here, Phil.
When you said top 3, I was initially a little nervous about that, only because his history at Texas, he's got 1 top 3 finish in 8 races, and it was a victory. But I don't hate it because he's the fastest car as far as total speed on these comp tracks so far this season. And he's got a 50% hit rate finishing in the top 3 on these mile and a halves this season, including a victory. So I could get down with a little plus money for top 3. Top 3 scare the shit out of me. Because it's such a hard thing to do. But I agree with the reasoning behind it. I mean, we're just going all in on Denny, just kind of clearing those hurdles and being like championship ready at this point if you're taking him that number.
Would you prefer minus 112 for a top 5? Because that is the question mark, I guess, there.
I mean,
it's so hard to bet minus money for a top 5.
I guess the reason, agreed. I guess the reason you take him for a top 3 is the plus money. And if he's good enough to be there, like we saw in 4 races this year, if he's good enough to be up front, he's going to be in the top 3. Yeah,
that's a great point.
He finished 1st and 2nd. So if he's not, 34th place finish, 11th place finish, or whatever the other one was, he's just not there. So I think it's going to be way I don't know. I don't think you're going to be sweating out a Denny Hamlin in 4th trying to track down the 3rd place driver.
It's either going to be there or it won't be.
Yeah, you're either in it or you're out. Yeah.
Okay. Anything else from you in this placement prop market before we move on to head-to-heads and matchups?
Well, I was um I was looking at a head-to-head matchup and then kind of landed on a top 10, and it was Bubba versus Brad. And
Mm,
guys on the betting preview show called out Bubba for a top 10, which kind of for the reasons that you mentioned earlier. He's just kind of turned the corner. This is looking like a good round for him. Uh, and that's fine. I was looking to take one side in that matchup, and I was like, you know what? I think I'm more comfortable with Brad as a minus 120 now on FanDuel,
yep.
for a top 10, because Brad this season, dude, like we could just start with like recent finishes, I guess. Um,
It's insane.
it is insane. Like they have turned a corner.
Yeah.
And the point that I made last night was it didn't matter. Like the last four races, okay, it's Daytona, Darlington, Kansas, and Bristol. That's a super speedway, a mile and a half, and two unique racetracks. And his finishes are second, sixth, ninth, and eighth. It
Wow.
doesn't matter what you're throwing at this guy right now. Like for whatever reason, RFK, Busher included, and Brad have been able to maneuver the way through the field. And then you throw in the fact that he's got four straight top 10 finishes at this racetrack.
Yep.
It's
Yep.
just like, I don't want to be on the outside looking in, because there's been a few times recently where I'm like, you know what? I'm not getting in on Brad. And then he's going out and he's qualifying in the top 10. Kansas was his fastest race, this most recent Kansas run. And that was a correction when he was 29th as far as speed ranking at the first Kansas race. He was sixth last time around.
Yep.
So
Improving.
improving for whatever reason. Something might have gone wrong in that first race. But regardless, the team is showing speed. And at minus 120, I'm fine. I'm fine giving up a little juice for top tens. I've learned to kind of accept that with what the books have been giving us. So Brad is someone that I'm high on.
I like that, man. I honestly might be adding that to my card after hearing that. And I mean, you're right, dude. Just the turnaround we've seen from RFK this season. They're kind of like the track house out of last season, kind of came out of nowhere, surprised everyone. And you look at the average finish for Brad since 2020 here at Texas. He's number one, 6.8. He's been brilliant, 4 top tens, as you mentioned. So I don't mind that at all. Let's go ahead. Let's shift gears to the head-to-heads and groups. And I'll let you lead off here because I have a feeling I know where you're going with one. And I think we might be going against each other.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, I'll say, the just a quick one other top 10 that's
Yeah.
a value play. Alex Bowman, he's plus 190. Last night on the betting preview show, Greg Mathern called him out for a plus 200 number, like 2-1. And I think, people heard that and bet it down. For the reasons that we talked about, Bowman being a good DFS player this week, not qualifying well, then rebounding. He's got one of the best average finishes in the last 10 comp tracks, top 3 in the last 4 this season. So at plus money, like if you're sick of the juice, he's someone to look for a top 10. That's all I'll say about that. But transitioning into the head-to-heads and the groups, I talked about Bush over Busher. That's one. I'll just throw a quick one. I'm high on Blaney. So his head-to-head matchup that's only out there right now is against Chase Elliott. So I've made a case for Chase in certain ways, but I think Blaney can beat him in a head-to-head matchup at minus 120. But I don't know. I'll tread the waters here lightly.
Yeah.
It's a group bet. Is that where you're looking at?
Yeah.
No?
You looking at Caesars over here?
Looking at Caesars, Group D.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right. So to lay this out there for anyone listening, it's Corey LaJoie, Ryan Preece, Harrison Burton, and Justin Haley. They are all plus 250. So who are you on in this one?
I'm on Ryan Preece.
Ryan Preece. Okay.
And yeah, I imagine you're backing Haley here, and the stats at Texas do say to go Haley. So is that why you're backing him? He had the 5th place finish. The comp tracks, I'm pretty sure he also ranked above these guys. So is that why you went Haley here?
A lot more to do. Like I think last year's race is a good feather in the cap, like a good confidence builder, but it's not why I'm taking Haley. It's more so the comp tracks and the consistency of his resume that he's built up compared to these guys. So Do you want me to get into it, or do you want to go
Yeah,
first?
Go for it.
So I actually looked at this and said, I'm throwing Burton and Priest out. I said,
Oh, okay.
they're gone. I don't care about them. And I looked at it as a plus 250 number for LaJoy versus Haley. And I was like, I got to find a side here. And I kind of thought that I was going to be looking at LaJoy, but looking at the numbers here, it's all Ryan, or excuse me, it's all Justin Haley, because in the last 10 comp tracks since the start of the 2022 season, all of the other three drivers, Priest, LaJoy, and Burton, combine for 4 top 15 finishes. Okay. Haley has 4 of them by himself, and that includes 2 top 10s. So that right there is like, okay, in 2023, Haley has 1 top 10, 2 top 15s, and 3 top 20s. His average finish is 15.5 on these mile and a halves. That is way better than anyone else in this group. The next best guy is all the way down to Corey LaJoy at 19.8. He's 4-0 head-to-head against LaJoy on these tracks this year. 4-0 against Burton. Now, you're kind of on the right track. He's 2-2 against Priest, which I didn't look into what happened on those races, but he's 10-2 versus these other guys head-to-head straight up. And his speed ranking is better. Average finish is better. Win the races model has him much better than anybody else in this group. So, and even DraftKings has him priced higher than everybody else. So even they're on it a little bit, which I don't know why they have him priced higher in DFS, but yet they're all plus 250. I think this is an opportunity to take advantage of that. So I don't know where he's going to start. I can't predict that because he started 31st last year and did well. So maybe this number changed a little bit, but I love that they're all equal because I feel like, to me, that's an opportunity to pounce.
Yeah, and honestly, Haley was the one against Priest that I was really kind of worried about, I guess, going into this. But my rationale for Ryan Priest is I think he is the one in this group who still has something left to prove this season. Justin Haley, he's kind of riding out this ride right now. He knows where he's heading next year. Rick Ware Racing, love it or hate it, he's going to be over there in one of their cars. Corey LaJoy, kind of same thing for him. He was the darling to start the season, had a great start. It's kind of fizzled out. Harrison Burton, he's Harrison Burton right now. You know, he had a couple good runs there. Pocono, beginning of August, late July, he was looking good. But for me, I looked at the last 3 races, just the last 3 races. So I'm taking Darlington, I'm taking Kansas, and I'm taking last week's Bristol. Average finish for the 3 of them. Ryan Priest, 19.3. Corey LaJoy, 23. Justin Haley, 27.6. Harrison Burton, 32.7. Priest has won this group the last 2 out of those 3 races as well. And that includes Kansas, which is one of our best comp tracks. So I think Ryan Priest is the hottest driver right now in this group. So that's why I went with him. But I do agree with you that maybe I might even sprinkle a little something on, just to hedge a little bit on Haley. But I love that they finally gave us, regardless of what side you're on, something unique to bet on with a matchup of non-playoff drivers, of non-contenders here.
100%. And I think your reasoning for Priest is a good one. It's one that I was not looking at. I didn't look at current form. I didn't look at how they did in round one. And I think that's valuable because I was making that same case for somebody like Keselowski, right? I was using those numbers as a reason to like him for a top 10. So I can't deny that part of it. And that's a little bit eye-opening to hear, where I was, really all in on Haley, and having Priest beat him at Kansas, the most recent one. Yeah, I can understand why you're on somebody like that heading into it. So when you first started talking, I was like, I don't know what he's about to say, but it made sense to me. So yeah, good points. And you actually kind of make a good point. I mean, you could bet both of them at this point because they're all plus 250. You could bet both of them and still win a little smidge of money if you really wanted to, and just hope that the other two don't strike gold.
I'm not worried about Harrison Burton. I'll tell you that much right now. So
yeah, that's a fact. That's a fact.
Phil, round us out. Is there any other bet that we haven't touched on that's on your card, whether that's in the special market or anything we haven't touched on that you think the Backroad listeners should be on? Because I am tapped right now. My card is out there for the betting public.
So I will I'll mention another group bet, and then I want to get your take on a
Yeah.
couple other things that Caesar's doing, which I talked about on the pod. Group bet, Group B at Caesars, you could get Austin Dillon at plus 450. And you made a case for Dillon as to why, he was a pretty high tiered driver in the DFS world. He's going against Almirola, Hocevar, Stenhouse, McDowell, and AJ Allmendinger, all of which, like, if you go back and look at our rankings,
Yeah.
I think they're separated by like 2 tiers,
Yeah.
unless I'm wrong. But, plus 450 for someone who is consistently pretty good here. I mean, I laid out those numbers earlier. He's got a win, 1 top 5, 2 top 10s, and 6 top 15s.
Yeah.
6 top 15s. Like, that's how I immediately look to top 10, right? And I'm like, well, it's a bit of a stretch for him to make top 10. How can I make money on someone who is 6 for 8 top 15s at a racetrack?
Yeah.
And the group bet kind of just comes to you. I immediately look for a head-to-head. He's not available on a head-to-head. Group bet plus 450 against guys who are like so down the list of their, data points. This to me is like very intriguing. So I want to get your take on it.
Yeah. I saw this and I haven't laid anything on it, but I was intrigued as well. I think it is anytime you can take advantage of someone who maybe they're not good for a top 10, but top 15, top 20. That's what we're kind of looking here from Austin Dillon. The reason I'm a little worried is Hocevar is a wild card. Like,
Agreed.
I wish any of these bets with 6, what is it, 6 drivers in this group? Is that right?
Yeah, 6 guys. Yep.
I get a little bit worried if there's a wild card driver, and Hocevar is a little bit of a wild card for me. And I do like McDowell. He had a great run here last year, has in really good recent form as well. So those are the two that I struggle with a little bit. But at 4.5 to 1, damn, Phil, this is what I'm gonna be sleeping on for sure, man. I think you have a great point here, and obviously I love Austin Dillon this week. He's in all my DFS lineups.
Yeah, and he starts, pretty much mid-pack. So I don't think it's something that you need to like jump on. I mean, last year he practiced really well and he started 7th. So that would probably they would adjust those odds a little bit. But for the most part in his Texas career, like his average starting position is like 15th, like mid-pack. So
Yeah.
I still think it's not something you have to jump on. You can kind of wait a little bit and see
Yeah.
how those wild card drivers perform. But it definitely, I threw a little sprinkle on it already. I'm waiting to pounce on it on Saturday after. So that was the other one. And I just wanted to ask you,
Yeah.
Caesars,
Yes.
over-unders for where manufacturers, how many they're going to have in the top 10. Did you get a peek at this, Seth?
Yes.
Because I love it. I love the concept. I don't know where
Yes.
I land on these guys, but I love the fact that this is something you can bet on.
Rod and I dipped our toes in last weekend. Did
I
not
didn't
go well
see it
for the
last
kid.
week.
Yeah, did not go well for the kids. I was on the Ford over. Rod was on the Chevy over. Toyota just totally came in and fucked us with a knife. So I'm a little bit bent on it. We also have the qualifying matchups now as well.
Yes.
But go through the over under manufacturers top 10. Is there one or two that stuck out to you that you would be on over under?
The way I'll just give you my thought process in like
Yeah.
a minute. Ford's over under is 3.5, and the over is plus 120, and they hit the over twice in the last 3 races. So like, okay. So then you're just doing the math, like who's going to be able to do it? You got, Harvick and Blaney and, who else is going to be able to put something together?
Keselowski.
Keselowski. So
Yeah.
that gets you to 3. You need Logano. You need, somebody else to really kind of jump in there. So it makes it difficult when you look at it with reality, but the last history tells you it's possible. Same thing with Chevy. Over under is 4.5, and the over is the plus money. And they've had 5 drivers in the top 10 the last 2 years. So it's doable. And that's kind of the one where I was leaning, like plus 120 over 4.5. They've done it 2 straight years. and you got the Hendrick camp, which I think is going to be strong this
Yep.
year.
Two,
Mark
at
Mississippi
least.
mentioned Ross. Like you get some other guy jumping up there.
KFB, Austin
KFB,
Dillon.
Austin Dillon. Last year it was Haley jumping in. Like
Yeah.
there's it's more of a stable approach.
Yeah.
You got the whole Chevy camp. That's why their over unders higher, but still, like any random dart can hit, and it really helps you out. So I think I like that the most. Toyota's is 2.5, and the only way you're making money on that is if you either parlay the over, which last night I learned that Toyota's like unbelievable when it's super hot out. I didn't realize that. And it's supposed to be 100 degrees in Texas. So obviously that would lean towards the over, but they're minus 230 for the over. So you got to parlay that with something. You're not betting that by itself. It's too ridiculous of a thing to just bet by itself. So then you're either taking that with a parlay, Penn State money line maybe, or you are taking the under at plus 180, which has hit the last 2 years. Denny Hamlin was the best finishing Toyota last year in 10th place. And the year before that, only 2 Toyota drivers were in the top 10. So it's not it's not Kansas where they dominate. So that really is intriguing in that plus 180 number. But that heat situation, if it's super hot and Toyotas do well, I'm kind of doing a no bet there. That was my thought process as quick as I could get it out. So do you have any take on that stuff?
I think if there's one I'm willing to get down on, it is the Chevy over. I don't love the price on it, but like you said, there are so many good Chevys here that I think can compete. I think you can mark both Hendrick boys down for a top 10 here. You might get another one, whether that's Bowman or Chase from there. Ross, I think, is very much still in this thing. Kyle Busch, I'm high on that entire team there. So yeah, I don't mind this bet at all, Phil. I think this is, if you're trying to attack this market, I think Chevy's is how I want to do it this week. The Toyotas are really the wild card once again, kind of like they were last week. I think everyone was a little bit down on Toyotas heading into Bristol, and they showed up. So let's see what we get here. We got Mark in the chat saying here, a little moonshot from Mark in Mississippi saying a Quinella, KFB, and Bubba 70-1.
Let's go. I love it.
I don't mind that.
I love
actually.
Mark's Quinellas, dude. They're the best. And it's so hard to hit. But I love something like that.
Yeah, we appreciate Mark being here in the chat. We appreciate everyone being here in the chat tonight. Phil, tell the IBT audience where they can find you and your work and what you have going on the rest of the way, my friend.
Yeah, you can find me at Full Tank Phil, Twitter and Instagram. I put my card out there on Sundays on Instagram, and you can give me a listen on the Full Tank with Phil podcast every week. We talk Cup Series bets every week on try to do that on Tuesday nights, and you can find me on the NASCAR betting preview show on this channel, and truck race as well. Whenever there's a truck race, we put out a show for that if we can, and we've done a good amount well with the truck series. Not last week, Bristol was just a bad, but truck series is another thing we have going on as well. So a lot of stuff. Hit me up. Love to talk shop, and I appreciate you having me on tonight, Seth. This was a lot of fun.
Hey, Phil, it was a pleasure, man. I hope you enjoy your weekend. It's a big one in the sporting world. Not only do we have some NASCAR and NFL Week 3 happening, but old Penn State, baby, the whiteout. Iowa's coming to town. We're going to whoop on some Hawkeyes. So I know we'll be, we can at least root for that together here this weekend, my friend.
That's right. I'm excited. Appointment television.
Hell yeah. Well, we appreciate you, Phil. I appreciate all the IPT family stopping in. If you guys are new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button. Come back, hang out with us again. We have so much more content coming for you the rest of the NASCAR season. And of course, some fantasy football, some PGA content as well. Until next time, guys, keep it in between. And we hope you enjoyed this roll down the back road.